their lunchtime snack.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. And Courtney, if you could do roll call.
Absolutely. Christina Beering, Vaughn Jones or Kirk Will, Amy Moyer, John Ring.
Present.
Hi, John.
It's July 4th. It's 60.
Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally.
Present.
Hi, Commissioner. Brett Wolk, Katie McGrath Novak,
Here.
and Clyde Church.
Here. Here.
Everyone.
Thank you so much. So the first thing on the agenda is to approve the meeting minutes from last month, which was February 10th. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes, or does anyone have any discussion?
I'll move to approve them as written.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? All right, those meeting minutes pass. Cool. So I want to start off today. I basically just wanted to make space for anyone who had any updates or anything about kind of the current situation with federal funding freezes and such. I don't know if there will be any, but I wanted to just at least make space for that because I know there have been a lot of people affected in all of our different constituencies. So if anyone wanted to share anything, I just wanted to give that opportunity now.
Well, there is some good news out there. I just had an email this morning from Farm to Home Compost, and their grant that was frozen is now being processed to be paid. So some of the grants are breaking loose. I heard indirectly that Colorado State they have a number of reimbursement requests for grants around the state. Those are being processed, last I heard. And we've had a whole series of meetings with Bennett and Hickenlooper and the constituency around the state. It's been really interesting. A lot of legal action is being taken by various organizations to help free up those funds. And countering some of the federal mandates. So that's, hold your breath a little while longer. I expect to hear good news, but I think it's going to take 3 months or so, or maybe longer to get straightened out.
Awesome. Well, thanks for the good news. That's really good to hear. I'll have to look into you said Farm to Home Compost?
Yes. They're down here in La Plata County.
Awesome.
Well, I'll just share that, as you probably all know, but the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest headquarters in Fort Collins, the lease was canceled. It's on the Doge website, and that will have implications for firefighting here. And just, having local people in the area near the forest is really important. Really thrilled to hear the state legislature is holding furworm and co-swap at current levels as far as we know right now. And we have several grants that are still on pause that we just don't know. We met 3 times now with both senator and all 3 congressional districts in my county with staff, and then one-on-ones. I was in DC last week and also this past weekend. So lots going on, and we're just continuing to navigate these uncharted waters. So.
Cool. Thanks for sharing. And welcome to the couple people who just joined. It's good to have you. We were just talking about any updates that people wanted to give related to just any current events and funding freezes and such. And so far, good news is being shared, which I really like to hear. Oh, were you going to say something, or did you just pop in? You just joined. Okay.
I'm just here. Hi.
Awesome. Welcome. Sorry, I just saw your face pop up.
Mm.
I didn't know if that was because you wanted to say something. Awesome. Well, I want to give a little bit of setting the stage before we move into our presenter for the day. Chris West is here. So I just wanted to kind of recap some of the stuff that we talked about at our last meeting and then use that to kick into our presentation. So last meeting, we discussed some of the core challenges that we've heard from various different collaboratives and communities and other organizations in Colorado through things like the Forest Resilience Planning Guide, for example. And we kind of identified 4 key buckets of challenges. So I'll just go through those quickly. And then I just want to make sure, like, get a pulse, make sure that we're on the same page about that. So the 4 kind of main challenge buckets that seem to keep coming up. One is capacity. So things like capacity for compiling plans and prioritizing landscapes and gathering data and then using that data for something and facilitating collaborative efforts. And all of those things require a lot of work and effort and people. And funding sources don't typically cover a lot of that stuff. So that's one challenge. A second challenge is the match issue. Lots of communities and organizations struggle to find match, especially early on when like efforts are first getting started. The third is a lag in timelines. So, you know, from the time that you prepare your project to applying for a grant to when you submit that grant, and then you wait to hear back, and then you hear back, and then it's a reimbursement process. All of that can be kind of cause challenges and be challenging to manage. And then the last one, which we focused on a lot last meeting, is that there is really heavy emphasis in funding programs on the later stages of readiness. And there's not a lot of focus on the earlier phases of readiness, which is like when you're establishing your community of partners around a shared vision and translating that vision into strategy. So those things require a lot of time, effort, and money, and are not often funded. So those are kind of the 4 challenge buckets. And then as a committee, we are looking to pull in presenters both on the funder side and the fundee side to share various experiences, successes, challenges. And we will be listening to these presentations with an ear toward what recommendations we can make to ease some of those challenges and make funding more easily accessible. And I want to thank Amy Moyer. She and I met last week and kind of compiled some of the notes from previous meetings and talked through and got some direction. So thank you. And I just wanted to make sure we're on the same page about that. Does anyone have any questions, things to add? Does this seem like good to go? Clyde, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, thinking that I think we're headed in the right direction on the collaboration and the early funding issues. One thing I've been looking at this last, I don't know, month or so is the organization of the funding structure nationally, well, not statewide and nationally. And looking at how Canadian companies, wood products are organized and generally connected not only with a sawmill, but processing and chemical plants that use the wood byproducts, the shellacs, the turpentines, and all kinds of chemicals that come out of wood byproducts. And we might want to consider putting a little more emphasis on tying together our pieces of the wood industry, wood products industry, and into an overall Colorado strategy. I know Office of Economic Development. I sit on the Region 9 board and see wood grant applications coming through, loan applications. And they're usually pretty good. I mean, funded a $9 million chipper and some other plants and modular housing. But it's piece by piece, and they're all good pieces, but they're not tied together in a strategy that uses all of the opportunities and byproducts that come out of wood or could be used. So just expand that collaborative visioning into the future on the wood product side and grant applications. Thank you. I'll be quiet.
No, thank you. That makes a lot of sense. I feel like this is an issue that comes up a lot, and I think if we can tie it into some of the funding process that we're looking into, that makes a lot of sense. Diana?
Hey, yeah, I was just going to respond to that. We have we have a wood utilization and marketing program within the Colorado State Forest Service, and we work with a lot of those. We're working with different partners across the state, so we manage a revolving loan fund for those kinds of purchases. We've had some biomass grants in the past. We have a workforce development program. So there's kind of a lot that ties in, and in particular, like the furworm grant does incorporate wood utilization and requires people to reach out and have a discussion with someone from our program, and just to see if they can incorporate that into their program. So I think there is some connections probably already happening that you might not be aware of, but we can certainly incorporate that into any of these recommendations as far as like what we have available and how to find that too.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty good friends with Tim Reeder, Forest Service and wood utilization. We did a lot of windshield time together in the past. So great program. And yeah, maybe this ties into that better than it does through Forest Health. I don't know.
Thanks, Diana. Yeah, any other responses or thoughts on that topic or on the topic more broadly?
I can just chime in, Katie. Thanks. I think you did a really nice job summarizing of, thinking about the landscape of funding and how to make recommendations to improve the landscape of forest health funding is a daunting and big topic. And so trying to focus in on some of the overarching challenges, and as we hear from speakers, really listening for an eye towards recommendations or lessons learned, whether it's in compatible funding fields, like we might hear a little bit more from Chris, or like Diana said, maybe one program does a really strong job of connecting with wood utilization opportunities that we could look at expanding across the suite of funding opportunities. So I'm excited for where we might be headed as a committee, looking into this, knowing that it's a big topic. It's one that's hard to solve. And maybe the only other piece to add, Katie, is, some of these programs might require a legislative recommendation. And so we would work closely with Commissioner Shattuck McNally and the Legislative Recommendation Committee to think through if that's an opportunity that's coming up through our discussions here. So we could work with you, Courtney, and others to figure out how to navigate that.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, that was something we discussed on Friday, was like, what might these recommendations look like? And that's just one option. All right, cool. Well, if nobody else has thoughts on kind of the overarching direction, then I want to give the floor to Chris West from the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation. He's going to share a little bit about the Restore grant, which was the one that kept coming up, I think, the most in this group as one that people are excited to learn about and learn from. So thank you so much for coming, Chris, on somewhat short notice, and please take it away.
Sure. Thank you, Kate. Actually, sometimes short notice works better than planning something months in advance and then it gets canceled or who knows. And I apologize for the exceptional warm tones, but I did brighten it up on my camera. I cannot figure out why it's not quite as hot as it looks over here in my office. I'm going to share some slides and maybe go through it. And it really was good to hear about these 4 bullets, Katie, that you guys are considering. And I think I will, I guess, offer some interesting insights on capacity and match, and would love to hear more about the concerns on timeline, because we're probably guilty on some of that ourselves. So this would be an interesting discussion, and feel free to interrupt me, or we can talk at the end too. I'm going to try to do the sharing thing. So let's see if this is actually going to work. And is everybody seeing that?
Yes.
Yes. That looks good.
Awesome. Okay. Cool. I'm just going to go. So, once again, I'm Chris West. I'm with the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and really, talking about who we are is that we're a national 501c3 that was chartered by Congress, which puts us in a little bit of a weird category of nonprofits, because there aren't that many that kind of fall into that category of, and everybody can see these slides and hear me fine, because I can't see you now, which is a little weird on my end. So
It is weird. We see your slides. We do see it like in the PowerPoint editing kind of mode. We don't see it as a whole screen mode, which is okay,
That's
but probably
really weird. Okay. Is that any different?
no. I saw you click the correct button, but it didn't change our view.
Okay. Are the slides relatively big, or do you see this? What are you seeing? Because I'm seeing full screen. This is
Sometimes you have to unshare, I think, go into presenter mode and then share your screen.
got it. Let's try that. Okay. Bear with me. Technology is awesome. I will do that. I will mess with this a little bit. Put it in here. Okay. Let's try this one more time. See how this works.
Unfortunately, it is still looking the same. I can see it big enough on my screen personally.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
we'll just
roll
see
with it.
your notes. So sorry.
There's not a ton of notes in here, so it's kind of, it's so strange. Okay, that didn't make any difference on your end?
No.
So weird. Okay, anyway. As I was saying, who we are, what we do, is we are like this congressionally chartered nonprofit. So I'd like to say that we're kind of federally adjacent, but I'm not a federal employee. None of the we do have this relationship through our board with the Secretary of the Interior and with the Fish and Wildlife Service Director and the NOAA Administrator, who sit on our board along with 28 private citizens. And really what we do is make grants competitive through competitive grant making processes to bring and foster restoration, enhancement of our wildlife habitat and natural heritage through collaborations between the public and private sector. And we do that all over the country through about 50 different programs. Before I get to that, I think it's important, what we don't do is we don't lobby. We have a government affairs team, obviously, because of a lot of our federal relationships, but we don't lobby legislation. We don't have membership. So we're not that type of organization, and we also do not litigate. So we really try to position ourselves firmly in the middle and firmly focused on getting work done on the ground. So this slide is a complete mess, and that's actually on purpose because it talks about the complexity of what Restore Colorado is. And taking a couple steps back, about 5 years ago is when we launched this program, largely in partnership with Great Outdoors Colorado and the Gates Family Foundation, and somewhat in response to a couple of things, which was that we were each individually as funders being hit up for the same projects, but little slices of it from each of us, or we were getting different phases of different projects, and there was never kind of a concerted effort to to really focus the projects on something maybe a little bit bigger, but also making it more efficient for both sides, more efficient for applicants where you could come and have a one-stop shop, and I'll get into the match implications of that in a minute, but also much simpler on the funder side, where we have one application, collaborative review of those, and then one entity running the actual finances. And so NIFWF has stepped up. This is what role we play nationally, but this is the first time we have done it at the state level alone. The other part I think that's really important to that is having that framework, or that partnership of bringing funders together really allowed us at NIFWF to do two things, which was bring in the federal partners listed there on the right. And I heard at the beginning here, we had some discussion about things being held up, and we are firmly in that boat. We have some programs that are moving along with no interruption. We have some that have been frozen with no discussion of what's going on. And we've had a couple just recently that have been temporarily paused and have been since released and are apparently back to normal now. So we're excited about that. Obviously, that we're into a new era, and what that looks like in terms of new partnerships down the road, we will see. But one of the things that's really been helpful about having this Restore partnership, it has allowed us at NIFWF to funnel some of the national level dollars to Colorado specific priorities. And those are funds that probably otherwise wouldn't have made it to the state. And along with that, you'll see several corporate logos there as well on the non-federal side, things like Chevron, Oxy, Cargill, where we have relationships nationally where those entities are interested in various different things. I'll pick on maybe Cargill, for instance, that's very interested in grasslands and related, and for their purposes from a business perspective related to the beef supply chain, but they're very interested in native grassland conservation. And we've been able to bring several $100,000 of agreement, money through a national agreement we have with Cargill to Colorado because we have this Restore program in place. So anyway, convening the two sort of gray blue boxes of funders there through the program and putting those out into 59 grants in the last 5 years for a little bit over $16 million and those 43 separate organizations got those 59 grants. So there are some that have gotten more than one grant, but not, I think the average organization has gotten a single grant. So it's a pretty diverse group of entities.
Chris?
Yeah.
Here too. We're not seeing your slides progress. I'm wondering if we can try to reshare your screen one more time. Perhaps if you've been sharing a window, try sharing the entire screen. I know it also could just work for us to listen, but I want to see all this.
Yeah, or I wonder if I could
or you could export it to a PDF, and sometimes that works if you just share it through Acrobat or something.
Yeah, this should be a PDF right now. Well, okay, I'm gonna. Okay, so you didn't go past the initial slide.
No.
So strange. I'm trying to do this as a link now, so just bear with me for a minute. Okay, so where am I living right now? Am I sharing or not?
You are sharing. It's still your home. It's still the title slide.
So strange. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing.
I wonder if you just click the little thumbnails along the side, if that would also maybe help. Because we can like see your mouse moving and everything. So it's very weird that it's just not doing one single thing that we want it to do.
Yeah. Is this any different? Let's see if this moves along.
Okay, we're
Hey.
moving along.
Yes.
Now it's working. I have no idea what I really did differently there, but let's go with it. Okay,
Awesome. Thank you so much.
sure. Well, it moved once. Okay, so this is the slide I was talking over. So maybe I'll just pause pause here for a second. This is the mix of funders. You guys can all see this now.
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, this is where I was talking about this being able to bring in federal funds on one end and non-federal on the other, and that non-federal grouping for Restore Colorado is really diverse in that it has state funders. So this has public on both sides, but state funders along with our corporate partners and then some of our philanthropic partners like Gates Family Foundation, Walton Family Foundation, Bezos Earth Fund, for instance, are all on another part of the equation here. So really putting all of these into 59 different projects over the last 5 years. And we really looked at that first 5 years of this as a bit of a pilot opportunity to see, is this something that was going to work in Colorado? And is this something that's going to be helpful to people in the state who are trying to put projects forward? And I think, so part of the role that we play here at NFWF, and this is something that we do nationally, as you see there on the bottom, with about 1,000 new grants nationally every year. We're actively managing 3,000 plus or minus grants at any one time, and about 1,400 different funding sources. So you saw this is sort of like, while it's a complete mess, it's also our specialty, is sort of taking these complicated grant making programs with multiple sources of funding and multiple grantees and running those. And we do that, like I said, through about 50 different programs nationally, Restore Colorado just being one of them. But that's not only just picking the grants, but it's also the financial machine behind those and making sure that each of those different sources of money retains its uniqueness and its ability to be audited all the way through. And then, doing things, the whole grant process, which, as we take that on at NFWF, it allows all of our other partners to not do that and focus resources elsewhere. It also allows our applicants to just have one point of contact and one grant to manage, rather than working through multiple entities. So a lot of what I've just said was covered there: single application and pooling resources, state, federal, foundation, and corporate partners. Really, one of the things that we also looked at, and some of the projects I'll hit on here in a minute, get at, is the ability to look at public and private lands in particular in a single project, where it's not a project that has to have a hard stop where you hit the federal lands, or if it's a project that's on state lands, it can only have state funding. We're really able, with a mix of funding, to be able to hopefully match and do things that make sense ecologically or in the system, despite who it might be the owner in the kind of crazy quilt of land ownership that we can see in the West. And Colorado's about as quilt-like in terms of ownership as it gets from any place in the country. Couple of other things we really do try to focus and make sure that our focus is on those projects that have that wildlife habitat connection. Obviously, we're the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and we probably can talk about this a little bit, but there are sometimes, in particular around forest projects, that get at a lot of other co-benefits, community protection, and is one that really comes up often. But we really do try to find projects that have that wildlife restoration and habitat nexus in them. And then one of the points that Katie brought up was capacity. And we recognize fully that projects don't happen without somebody waking up every day and making sure that they happen. And so our grants, and we can talk about a little bit about some of the, where we plug in, which tends to be a little bit later in the process, maybe less planning and more implementation, but we also recognize fully that capacity has to be a part of any successful implementation, and then obviously monitoring of outcomes down the road as well. Another busy slide, but I really just talking about that whole mix of who's playing here. And so I think there's 14 over the last 5 years. There've been 14 separate or distinct funding partners that have put money into that $16 million cumulative pot of grants. And from the pie chart there, you can see the colors are a little tough to see, but the federal kind of contributions are about a quarter. That's the purple. The other one in the state level on the upper left is Great Outdoors Colorado, and they have really bought into this approach, really for their perspective, also for the simplicity and the leveraging that it gets. The upper right corner is other state sources of funding, which include CWCB and Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And then the bottom left is a combination of corporate and philanthropic, which is about another quarter of the funding that we've brought to the table for the program. This is just a slide from last year's slate. We are in the process of rolling out the 2025 slate. It's been a bit delayed because some of our federal money is a little hung up at the moment. We're really hoping to be able to announce those in early May this year. Usually it's a March award, and we just got to the point where it didn't make a ton of sense to be awarding grants that had funds that were frozen at the moment. So we're hoping that by May, with some of the thaw, will happen, and we will be able to announce a full slate of grants, probably about another 10 to 12 grants for 2025. But one of the things, and I don't know that I actually have a great slide for it. This one shows where all those different projects were, and really have had focus on a number of different things, and wetlands, riparian focus, grasslands, as I mentioned, with our corporate partners interested in grasslands and sagebrush. And then a big focus of the foundation nationally is migration routes and ability for big game animals in particular to move across highways and across landscapes, all over the state. And it's kind of a Western thing, but there are amazing numbers of highway projects in other parts of the country that are coming online now too. One of the things around forest land that we've really found is starting to talk about watershed health and focusing our forest work in places where it's matching up well with work on riparian, wetland, and river corridors in particular, or other resilience projects in a watershed, where it's not just we're managing forest for wildfire mitigation or community protection type things, but also where we can be looking at a watershed type approach, which I know is probably pretty similar to a lot of the planning efforts that are going on around forest health. And Katie, I'll get to the grant one at the end. I guess I wasn't ready yet. I must have nixed the matching grant, the match slide in here. But one of the things we also at the foundation have learned quite a bit is that one of the hallmarks of a successful grant is how invested the local community is in that, not only the project development, but the project implementation. And so we have developed some ways and really look in our projects to make sure that the project is not only happening in a community or to a community, but with that community and from that community. And so that includes things like job creation and trying to track, what the economic impact of conservation is, which is not insignificant, but sometimes I think gets glossed over. And people say, oh yeah, and there'll be jobs. Like, well, let's look at this. Like, what does $1 of investment in conservation practices or work on the ground result in terms of in a local community as compared to tourism, as compared to an extractive industry? What are we looking at here? And so I think that's something that we're going to be increasingly focused on going forward as well. And I'll just jump through a couple of these, and then I'll talk about match at the end here. But this is probably one of my favorite projects. It hit us on some of the forest health as well. But this is a project in Chaffee County that was run by the National Forest Foundation in combination with a number of local partners, which was really doing some forest restoration, some forest thinning in a part of the county that had high fire danger, but also had really high habitat value for mule deer in particular. The Chaffee County has a mule deer winter herd that summers in 7 different valleys and 7 different mountain ranges have mule deer that winter in the upper Arkansas Valley, which is really interesting when you start putting radio collars on some of these animals and you figure out where their annual movements are taking them. I mean, some of these animals are ending up in South Park or in Breckenridge or in the San Luis Valley or in Gunnison, and they're coming and wintering on some pretty limited winter range at lower elevation. A lot of this is pinyon juniper type habitat in Chaffee County near Salida and Buena Vista. So this was a project we worked really closely with the county and with National Forest Foundation on that one. And it was a $454,000 award, which is kind of a typical size award for the program. There's another one with a really heavy volunteer perspective with the Wildlands Restoration Volunteers up in Moffat County. This is a watershed resilience project that and some fencing, but this has a lot of rangeland implications. This is doing a number of the habitat things are focused on sage grouse and mule deer and elk winter range, but the work here is really improving rangeland health. You can see the guy in the corner. These are doing, really slowing water down, keeping water higher in the landscape, on the land longer, kind of trying to avoid the flash precipitation events and slowing that water down and growing grass with it rather than digging gullies with that water. And those wet meadows in this system are really key, not only for the wildlife, but they're also key places late in the summer for livestock and making these pastures more productive for the local ranching community as well. So they're really trying to find projects that are like these win-win. And this one also has 150 different people who are paying money actually to go and work and do this work. And this is on public land, private land, and state land up in Moffat County. I got a couple of contacts listed here. Katie's, I'm happy to share it up. But we've got a staff I'm based here in Colorado, as is Kirsten and Seth. Seth focuses a lot on our grassland and sagebrush programs. Kirsten's focusing on our watershed and forest programs. And then Daly is on our team, but based in Washington. And she is really the glue that keeps us tied or connected to the national staff in our Washington, D.C. office. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll talk a little bit, and I can jump back to these at any time, I guess. But I'm going to see if I can do this. And then talk a little bit about Match, Katie, just really quick, is that when we started this idea, we talked to quite a few of the different potential grantees, people who might be interested in doing this, or people who had been applying to the different organizations over time. But what would make this really effective? And all of them said, like, don't make us come up with individual match to do so. So one of the things we did, and this is the first, one of the first at NIFWIF that did this, was where we effectively, because we have so many of these 14 different funding sources within the program, we're able to meet all the matching requirements that any one of those funding sources requires. We can do that on the funder side. So we don't require entities to actually bring match to the table. I think one of the things about match, and our match can be cash or in kind or services or anything. So we can be relatively broad in our definition of what is match. But we've been really surprised by how people are excited to not have to bring match. But we also say, if you have it, please let us know, because it demonstrates that community support. I mean, oftentimes there'll be, we got $2,000 from the town, or we got $14,000 from the county, or, the CPW is loaning us a piece of equipment that is allowing us to do this, or something like that. And you'd be amazed at how much match is actually in a lot of these projects already that may not meet that formal cash match, or is a little bit harder to define if you're being in a really strict cash match type, and it gets the accountants and the finance departments involved, and people get nervous. But we really have been surprised by just how much local support these projects are showing already. And we're always happy to work with people who are looking to apply to see, like, do you have some cash match or some in kind in your project already that you may not have thought of. But like I said, we really look at it as a way of making sure that the community is bought into a project. And even if it's just that the county road and bridge crew is going to come out and clean culverts, and they can count that towards something for a watershed project or something like that, those all matter, and it all shows that this is important to a local community. So we run this program on an annual basis. The applications are generally due in the late summer or early fall, and then we make awards over the winter in a normal year. Like I said, we got delayed this year because of changes in Washington. We hope to be back on that schedule next year. But we're also looking at now building this out for the next 5 to 10 years. So we kind of went through our pilot process, had, I think, generally overwhelmingly good reaction to it, great projects. We're talking with some of our grantees on how we can make this better. And usually the answer is bring more money. And we're working on that as well, figuring out how we can be a more efficient and more effective by doing projects better, but also bringing more money to do more projects, because clearly there's a huge demand from what we've seen. And maybe I'll stop there and we can talk questions from here on out. And apologies for my presentation skills.
Thank you so much. I don't think that was your presentation skills. I think Google Meets is just weird. That was great. That was a really awesome presentation. And just for everyone's knowledge, I had asked him to go a little bit more in depth on the match piece there at the end, because I think that's what we all have been really talking about. So before I get into any questions, does anyone in the committee have questions? You can just go ahead and raise your hand. Amy, go ahead.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chris. I have a few questions. So I'll ask one, and maybe Katie, make sure others have time to ask questions. But, I'm curious of what the barriers are for standing up an opportunity like this. There's so much about a program like this that makes a lot of sense. And so you wonder why it doesn't seem to be replicated as frequently. So I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about why aren't there more opportunities like this in other spaces like forest health that would make sense to, what you had mentioned of allowing for projects that make sense ecologically as opposed to political boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And then associated with that, maybe I'm looking at how to ask multiple questions in one way while I have the floor. How do you reconcile the different funder goals by bringing everyone together? So multi-part question, I guess.
Yes.
I'd love to hear
I think the first answer, Amy, is that collaboration is hard, and everybody you have to end up at a better place at the end of it. That doesn't mean everybody wins on everything they want either, but I think what we saw was funders. Well, two things. One is the funders who were already investing in this in Colorado were sort of a little bit exhausted by the multiple asks and the partially funded projects and the projects not done at scale. And that's exactly what the applicants were finding too. So we're saying, okay, what's stopping us from doing this? I think the other part of this is that we were set up to deal with the finances of this and be a value add at the same time, where we could bring additional dollars to this if we had a structure. So I was sitting here with Forest Service dollars that could go anywhere in the Western US, but now that we've got a program in Colorado, I can funnel them there. We've had other funders who are just like, I'm only interested in working in Colorado. What do you have there? This is a really easy place to plug in. But I think the short answer is that everybody has to sort of check their goals a little bit put them a little bit to the side and say, okay, what can we do more together than we could possibly do separate? And I think you also just get staff where, if you're on the funder side, you're tired of it's a lot of work to administer a $20,000 grant. It's almost exactly the same amount of work as to administer a $400,000 grant. So there's some just economies of scale there that we were ready to do it. Your second part of your question was about, remind me, because I got distracted on it.
No, I think you covered some of it, Chris, was how to reconcile different funder goals and the
Oh, yeah.
getting.
So, yeah, just I think So we'll have funders. I'll pick on Chevron, for instance, is really interested only in northeastern Colorado. So we just, as we go into this, we've got, I think there's 11 in our current slate that we're developing right now. And you just have to go in knowing that we've got some money that's only tagged for northeastern Colorado. We've got some money that's only tagged for this, and you have a diversity of applicants, and sometimes you'll have 3 great projects and only funding that really is tagged to it for enough for one of them, and that's hard. That's really hard. But it just takes some diligence, and the real magic on it, honestly, is a funder like GoCo who says we are willing to fund all of it. The best projects matter. So they're really helping us out. Gates Family Foundation has been that way as well, where they're saying if it's in Colorado, which the whole program is, we want to be funding the top scoring projects. So it really allows us to sprinkle that money in and augment it with those that might have, say, oh, we're only interested in grasslands, or we're only interested. Walton Family Foundation, for instance, is only interested in the Colorado River watershed, which thankfully is a good chunk of the state. But the projects in the Arkansas that you might want to fund, and okay, that's fine, but Walton is not going to be part of that. So in a way, we kind of call it conservation bartending, where you've got all these choices behind you, and gin and tonic's great, but tequila and whiskey is really terrible. And you just got to know which ones can go together, and have that financial system behind it to be able to track those different funding sources through the whole program, which is something luckily we've built as an organization nationally over the last 40 years, that ability, which is it's not really very fun or easy, but we have it. So sort of a long rambling response. My apologies there.
Oh, that's great. I have a quick follow-up to that. You showed like the team contact info at the end. What is the capacity to be the conservation bartender? Is that a 5-person team for 17 million? Is that right? Is something like that?
Oh yeah. Well, that team runs, that team runs multiple programs. So we run, and like I said, 3 of us are based here. Daly is based in DC, and we've got 3 other regional team members. So there's about 8 of us on our regional team for the foundation, but that's covering kind of all of our grant making within the Mountain Time Zone. So we're spread relatively thin. Having 3 Coloradans in the mix doesn't hurt in terms of outreach and being able to do that, but we do kind of pride ourselves on doing this efficiently. And I think a lot of that's because we have that big back end financial machine there, where there's probably, like I said, 8 staff who are doing this regionally, and there's probably 20 people who touch these projects at one stage or another in our, be it in compliance or finance or government affairs or communications on our end. So they only do it for a couple of hours during their year, or a couple of hours a month. But we really are able to draw on all of that to run the program. But I would say really it's going to be Daly and I, and then would be one of our program coordinators in DC for the most part running it.
Okay. Wow. You guys do a lot.
We're also, we do a lot, but we also we're funding. We're not out there as much as I would like to be doing the project and doing the actual work. We rely on those local implementers to get this stuff done.
Yeah.
And we try to also find places where, like, we'll be going to the Partners in the Outdoors conference, where we can meet with, several dozen potential applicants in one place, and spend time getting to, where people can ask us questions about becoming an applicant.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wish I could go out and see every project every year that we are funded, but I think regionally I've got like 500.
Oh my gosh.
It's a lot.
Awesome.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just wondering, you have the projects, you have the funders, you have the government agencies. How many different types and formats of grant administration do you have to file with your funders? What are they looking for? In our case, in Colorado, grant administration has become quite burdensome, not terribly, but it's something that's really out there.
It's all over the place, Clyde. There are, as you can imagine, it will be really interesting to see if there is any streamlining or efficiency that is coming up from our federal partners on this, because they're not easy. And like I said, like that financial and administrative back end, there are probably 4 people within our agency or within the foundation whose job it is to interact with the agencies on grants, admin, and contract administration, which is, to me, would be kind of mind numbing to have that be your whole job. But that's the scale of which we do it. There are some of our corporate partners are fantastically simple. They cut a check and they say, tell us what you ended up doing with us, and if you have a site visit, invite us along so we can see. It's really all over the place on that. And but you're not wrong that it is one of the reasons we're maybe able to do it with a leaner staff is we have people who that is their job, is to administer stuff on, particularly Fed funds can be really tricky. And I know state of Colorado may be easier, but maybe not. I mean, bureaucracy can eat you alive.
Colorado is easier than the Fed.
Right. So yeah, that's just part. I think that's just part of like taking on and running this. But if you have 11 separate entities trying to do that versus one, there is some savings there, even if it is burdensome on the one.
Thank you.
Yeah. Katie, one thing you talked about was the timeline lag, and I'd also maybe like to hear, we are not as slow or we are a little bit more nimble than the feds. We are not super fast, and we do work generally on a reimbursement basis, and we do generally work late in the process, meaning that you hit on projects that we're kind of in the planning stages, and we're happy to fund a little bit of planning. We're happy to fund the capacity for the work to get done, but if somebody comes to us and just with a planning grant, it's probably not for us. If it's implementing something that's been well planned, we're tend to be 100% in. But I'm just curious if there's specific things on, and we do generally work on a reimbursement basis, which can be tricky as well. We do have some exemptions and some ability to front some of the grants, at least startup money on the front end of grants if needed. But I know that can be a real impediment to applications as well.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much summed it up. Those are kind of 2 of the main issues, like the timeline one, and other people can chime in with more detail, but I think that's really about like, you do put a lot of capacity into like planning out these projects so that they're shovel ready, and then you kind of sit around and wait, and maybe it gets funded and maybe it doesn't. And if it doesn't, then you've kind of spent a lot of time preparing it. And then if it does, you still have to kind of wait to hear back. And then you have to find your contractors and get reimbursed, all that. And I don't know, I'm sure there are positive examples of where people have found solutions to that.
I wonder if there's some opportunity to, I mean, I kind of look at it as a pipeline, and you put something in one end and you don't quite know when it's going to come out the other end.
Mm-hmm.
But that does take capacity to get them in there. I wonder if there's ability to sort of have some of the maybe larger or regional organizations serve as an aggregator, or serve in some of the, one of the things we often see is, especially when you get to those $400,000, $500,000, $800,000 grants, some local watershed groups or just small communities aren't really going to be able to either manage or spend that money at that level. But we often will see, I'll pick on Trout Unlimited or is one that would aggregate 4 or 5 different projects, put them into one application, and then serve as the fiscal agent. Mm-hmm. And that would take some of the risk off of the local groups, or allow them to feed into a bigger package. That's one thing I wanted to bring up. The other one is that we are really getting to be adamant about making our grants multi-year. We have very few 1-year grants, and I would say the average is 2.5 to 3 years, and we often extend those out. So giving groups a little bit more certainty. When you get more money, it also helps on that. When you get more certainty, you can do multiple field seasons, multiple subcontractors, that kind of thing. And so we really do want to see those 2 and 3 year grants as a matter of course, and not have these be short-term things where, especially on capacity, if you're trying to hire somebody and it's on a 1-year grant, you spend the first 2 months figuring out what your job is, the last 2 months figuring out what your next job is, and very little time actually doing the work. We also see grantees that will layer their grants, so that when it gets to be year 2 of their 3-year grant, they're applying for the next one, so they can get a little bit more seamless. So some of it is just getting that pipeline of things going and understanding that you're not quite sure when it's going to come out the other end of the pipeline, but if you've got enough in there, you may be able to diminish some of that risk. The other downside to that is you put a lot of stuff in the pipeline and it all comes out at once, and then you're overwhelmed,
Right.
which is another problem for sure.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I feel like we could keep going all day, but it is 12:58. I think we can go ahead and push the rest of the agenda items off till our next meeting. If anyone else has any other follow-up questions for Chris, please email them my way. And Chris, I would love to follow up.
Yeah.
Is it all right if we share the slides with the committee?
Yeah. I will try to figure out how to get you that link.
Yeah, if you could just
Yeah.
email it.
Yeah. Actually, you know what the best thing to be, because Daly Burns would have done most of this presentation had she got pulled into a DC meeting all day today, so I feel sort of bad for her. But if you could just reply to that little chain, Katie, and I'll have Daly send it to you in a way that's digestible.
Okay.
I'm pulling this off of our shared drive, which I don't think is going to work externally.
Okay.
So-
Awesome. Well, that sounds great. Well, thank you so
Okay.
much, Chris, and thanks to everyone.
Absolutely. Well,
Yeah.
thanks to everybody, and as we pull this together, and if you got ideas for projects, we always are open to hearing about them and wanting to see ways to find money for good work to happen.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Okay. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.